Yeah, I can see your
Awesome.
screen.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. Thanks.
Well, just let me know when we're
Yeah,
ready to get started.
for sure. But I think 28. Right, fine. I think we have most of the fellows have already joined in, so I'll just kick this off. First of all, thanks a lot, Stephanie, for taking out the time and helping out the fellows here, understanding the one-on-ones of like DAOs, infra, and storage as well. So, and that is completely what today's workshop slash session is about. So the reason, just to quickly reiterate on why we are doing this session, is for the fellows who are in their first week of the fellowship of the 8 weeks. They are like sort of in the exploratory phase right now. Yesterday they had a session with Rahat on DeFi, NFTs, and metaverse, and today we'll be covering DAOs, infra, and storage. And this is a quick glance for all our fellows to sort of get a basic understanding of what is out there, and maybe if it is something which sparks their interest, they can take it ahead with their mentors and eventually discuss ideas and eventually build adapt by the end of the fellowship. So handing it over to
Awesome.
you, Steph.
Great. Well, I will switch over to my presentation view. Can you all still see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Yes.
Great. So I'm going to be talking about DAOs, storage, and Infra today. I'm really excited to meet all of you kind of virtually and talk to you about these topics because they're really cool Web3 topics. And I hope you all enjoy the presentation. I can't see any of the chat. So if you have a question or anything, just come off of mute and interrupt me. It's totally fine.
Yeah, like I'll be keeping an eye out on the chat, so I'll prompt you if there's anything.
Cool. Thank you so much. I just wanted to give a quick introduction of myself. GM, good morning. I'm Steph. I'm a developer advocate at Polygon. I'm Oceans404 on Twitter, and I'm currently based out of Los Angeles, California. I used to be in Seattle. I actually just started at Polygon about 3 weeks ago. But in my past life, I was a software developer at Amazon. I worked at AWS for 2 years and then Prime Video for 1 year. So I come from a development background like a lot of you. And I got into Web3 from Web2 last year towards the beginning of the year, developing NFTs. That was what I was really excited about at the time. But kind of since then, I've gotten really passionate about like the infrastructure side, and I love developing in the Web3 ecosystem. So DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. I'm sure you've heard DAOs thrown around. It's a really hot topic. People say that this is the summer of the DAO or the year of the DAO, which is pretty cool. But I am the type of person who doesn't like acronyms, which are like 3-letter abbreviations of things. There's so many acronyms. And at a certain point, they stop losing meaning to me. So I wanted to go through what a DAO is and kind of break it down for all of you. This is a long-winded explanation, but I think it's a good one by consensus. This comes from an article called What is a DAO and How Do They Work? And a DAO is a community-led entity with no centralized authority. It's autonomous, transparent. Usually there's smart contracts in place to lay down the foundations and rules and execute decisions. There's voting. And ultimately, a DAO is governed by individuals who make the decisions and do the technical upgrades and treasury allocations. And I just realized I never gave you the link to these slides in case you wanted to look at the links. So let me just grab the link quick. And I'll paste it into the chat for you all. Cool.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so back to DAOs. So again, DAOs are decentralized. So there's not a CEO or king or central authority that's in charge that everyone looks to make decisions. Instead, they're governed by the members of their community. So a lot of these DAOs have thousands of members, and each person has kind of like an equal voice or could have an equal voice if they participated, which is a really cool concept. And in my head, that's how democracy or different types of government are kind of supposed to work. Like in the US, we have the saying like, for the people, by the people. But we obviously have a president, and a lot of different organizations work that way, where there's like one figurehead or one person everybody looks to for the decision making. And a DAO is different because it's not that way. A DAO could have a founder or a few founders, but the goal is that it's eventually decentralized so that the power isn't with one person or a small group of people. It's with everyone who's part of the DAO. So next part of DAOs is that they should be autonomous. So when you think of things that are autonomous, usually there's some kind of code behind them to make them run in a way that you don't need a manual input or a middleman. So in a DAO, infrastructure through code is usually executed by smart contracts that define the different rules of the DAO. So the smart contract rules are made to automate decisions, and these can only be modified through a DAO vote. And as you know, probably a smart contract, it can't be updated. Like you can't go back in the smart contract and change the code. So the DAO would have to vote to put out a new contract or something like that so that you could update kind of the conditions of how things are supposed to run. Another thing is that DAOs should have automated mechanisms for things like voting and fund distribution. So if you're having a vote, your president or two people in the DAO should not go through and count all the votes for you and say, oh, this was the result of the vote. It should be automatic, and it should be done in a trusted way through code probably, so that you know that the vote was fair and that it was counted and there wasn't one person kind of messing with the numbers or any voter suppression or anything like that. And the same goes for fund distribution. So if you're paying members of the DAO to do tasks, that should also be automated so that there's not one person that is cutting off funds to folks or paying some people more and some people less. That should all just be in the code in an autonomous system that does that part for you. And the last word of the DAO is organization. So in a DAO, the org chart or the org structure should be relatively flat and fully democratized. Usually DAOs are put together because a bunch of people are aligned on the same goals or interests. So they act as a DAO to push forward those goals or interests. And there's lots of different types of DAOs. So those interests could be all over the place. But decisions by these members are made by voting on proposals, and proposals can come from anyone in the community. Again, the decentralized part means that there's no central leader that says, these are the things that I think we should do. Anyone in the community can say, this is something I think we should do, and then the community votes on it. And usually that vote is not just effort, but like funding. So imagine we were all in a DAO together, and I said, we should give this person $5. That would be a valid proposal, but everyone could vote on it and say yes or no. And somebody else could propose something else and say like, no, we should give them $10. And then we could all vote on that. So DAO HQ is a platform that has lots of different information about DAOs. It kind of indexes them, and it has a bunch of like little short descriptions. So I just grabbed this screenshot from DAO HQ to give you all kind of an idea of some of the different DAOs. I think there's over 1,000 DAOs on DAO HQ, but you can see the DAO name and their mission. So for Aragon, it's to govern better together. It's the leading platform for decentralized governance and DAO tooling. There's Bacon DAO, which sounds like it's a DAO for people who like bacon, but looks like it is for thinkers and investors. Bold DAO, the boldest people in the world. Bright Moments DAO. Like there's tons of DAOs and they all have their own missions, is kind of the point of this slide. So one of the DAOs I'm in is called FWB, or Friends with Benefits. It's a DAO that's located in tons of different cities all over the world. And the way to join the Friends with Benefits DAO is to be accepted and then to hold 5 Friends with Benefits tokens that you can purchase. So if you're in this DAO, you have to have at least 5 of the tokens, And then you have access to different events and parties and conversations. So it's kind of like a social club, but it is token gated by these tokens. And the FWB token is used to vote on different proposals. So you can see this top proposal says FWB x Hennessy partnership. And it looks like this vote was a yes. And 47,000 FWB tokens were used in this vote. So we know that not necessarily 47,000 members, it would, like the least number of members it could be is 47,000 divided by 5, since that's how many tokens minimum you need. But your tokens give you voting power. And in this case, there was a yes vote because more tokens voted yes. Another DAO I'm in, and maybe some of you are in this one too, is Developer DAO, which is a community of builders in a collective ownership of the internet. So let's click into this. It's taking us to the Developer DAO website. I think the DAO was started last year, and the founder is Nader Dabit, who I'm sure a lot of you follow on Twitter because he has awesome content. But now the DAO runs autonomously, and you can see the mission is to accelerate education and bring in a new wave of Web3 builders like you all. You can see the values listed out, the goals, and how do I join? So to join DevDAO or Developer DAO, you have to have one of the NFTs in the collection. So you get access to the Discord and all of the events and the network by purchasing an NFT. So we can look at the collection on OpenSea. But this is just a different example of how membership in a DAO works. So again, with the Friends with Benefits example, it was by owning a certain number of a token. And then for Developer DAO, it is by owning an NFT. So you can see this is an example of one of the DevDAO NFTs. Okay, so the key differences between a DAO and a traditional organization. A DAO is typically flat, whereas a traditional is hierarchical. I can't even say it, hierarchical, like a pyramid. So fewer people at the top make the most decisions, and then more people at the bottom like don't have as much of an impact typically. But in a DAO, everybody has the same amount of power and can impact decisions no matter who they are. So next difference is voting. DAO requires voting to do pretty much anything, especially financial decisions, whereas in a traditional org, it really depends, right? Like if the CEO says something, usually that is what happens. But, you know, like in a DAO, it would be put to a vote. Another thing, it's that autonomous piece. So in a DAO, votes are calculated autonomously or automatically without needing an intermediary to tally them. In a traditional org, like a government, essentially, we don't really, like the votes would go through machines or something, and then sometimes they would even be manually counted, which to me sounds crazy because we have these coded ways that we could do this, but traditional orgs have their own counting mechanisms. The next thing, services are handled automatically. So that's really similar to the voting. The money or any distribution is just automatic from a smart contract when certain actions are performed, rather than having humans do this for the organization. And then the last thing about a DAO, activity is transparent and fully public. So if we go back to either the Developer DAO example or anything else, so Developer DAO also uses Snapshot for proposals, similar to Friends with Benefits. And these proposals are completely public, right? So we can see what's being proposed, and also like a description. And you can also see how people voted. So this is all transparent, so you know who was for it, who was against it, and what was being proposed, even outside of the DAO. And then, of course, in a traditional organization, things are typically kept private. Even at publicly traded companies, like, we don't have full insight into what's going on inside the company. It's a private activity. Okay, next is storage, but I'm going to go back to the chat and stop presenting for just a minute and give you all about like 5 minutes to talk about DAOs if you want to, or ask any DAO questions. And I don't want to be the first person to answer a question. If someone asks a question or says something interesting and you have something to add, feel free to come off mute and say something as well.
Hello, Stephanie and everyone here. I'm Anushka. So my question is that usually in DAOs, there's a high chance that the community outvotes the CEO or the founder or the co-founder. And many a times it might be the case that the communities don't think in an entrepreneurial way. So I sometimes believe that power should be centralized to few people where they can really make the decisions. And because maybe in the community people might not think as rationally as as few people like CEOs or founders think. So don't you think at that time maybe there's a flaw in the DAO or the way it's structured, or in the total essence of how a DAO should work?
I guess
That's a
to
really
tackle this,
interesting idea. Oh, go for it.
okay,
I was just passing it off.
yeah, no problem. I was just thinking, many DAOs use this different types of structures to give voting power to people. So sometimes you hold one vote for one token, and sometimes you get more votes for more tokens. So uh, if you are holding more tokens, for example, for the DAO, so your vote will count. Uh, how do I put this into perspective? Like, the weightage is more for your vote,
Yeah, I
basically.
get that. But then how is it different from the centralized structure we have today as well? Many a times the decision depends on how much ownership of the stocks a person has. So whoever has the most amount of the stocks gets to take the decision. So how this like voting, like deciding on the weightage of tokens you have, we can decide, like there's no difference in the two structures then, right?
The difference is that you
Actually,
can distribute it more uh, efficiently, right? So because stocks
basically,
are
it
in units.
also,
Yeah, Rupali. Sorry.
yeah, sorry, but it actually also depends upon the time, like how much time you are holding the token, and that time period also defines your weightage. So if you are joining the company earlier, then of course you are having the knowledge of the company, and then your weight of the like token, like the power to vote will be higher. So that way it would be a smooth channel.
Just one more point. They asked about you know CEO can be kicked out from the company, or like they don't have entrepreneurship mindset. So tackle that, one country can be like similar to a company when it gets started and later on it become public. So initially you cannot you can choose not to be a DAO. Initially you can plan out your things, and later on when you are like your goals are set and your mission is like now perfectly, so at that time you can be a DAO and airdrop things and ask people to join your DAO, and you can proceed with those things then.
I have a question. Uh, wouldn't DAOs make each decision longer to take? Wouldn't make the entire process more tedious and lengthier than a single central authority who has already researched everything and taking the decision? Isn't that a thing we should consider too?
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the major criticisms of DAOs is that because everyone can weigh in, they're less productive than a typical company where you have a hierarchy and someone can just be like, I'm overriding this and making the decision. But typically, I've seen in DAOs that I've participated in, there's like 10 key people in the DAO that talk the most in the Discord or have the ideas that they share a lot. So the people who communicate the most tend to be the ones putting out these proposals and asking people how they feel. And then they also have to constantly be soliciting votes. So yeah, it is a little bit unproductive in that way. But one thing about DAOs is that typically they're started by one or two people, a few people that see something the same way. And so people join the DAO because they align with the values and the vision. So hopefully they're more similar and aligned because they share a vision for how they want the DAO initially. And obviously, like, things happen and long term the vision could change. But I do think that people in a DAO are typically more similar than, let's say, people that all live in the same country and want to vote on your next elected leader.
Could you like throw some light on different types of voting mechanisms that you have seen? Because we were having this discussion earlier, right? That maybe, as Rupali added, that the time you are holding those tokens, that adds to your reputation of the vote and such things.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea. I don't know that I've ever seen someone do voting like that. Usually people just use snapshot and there's no weight given to people who have been in the DAO longer or who purchased the tokens earlier. But that's a really cool idea. If it doesn't already exist, you should totally build that for a hackathon or something.
Actually, I guess Aave has implemented this sort of thing. Like, I read a article on which I came up with this particular thing that the like your votes will be not only just be the part of the tokens you are holding, but also will define that how much time you have holded those tokens.
Cool. I didn't know they have that. I would love to see that implemented by more DAOs. Cool. I will head back to the presentation. Let me share my screen again. The next thing we're going to talk about is storage. So before we talk about storage, let's bring it back to a definition of blockchain. A blockchain is a public database that's copied, updated, and shared across many computers in a network. When a transaction posts, it's added to the latest block and the chain grows. When I think of a blockchain, I think of like just this very, very manual spreadsheet with someone adding more and more and more records. But like this definition says, a blockchain is copied across every computer and anything you add to it grows the entire chain. So some of the things on a blockchain include NFTs, right? Which are collections typically of about 10,000 different images with metadata. And I don't know about you, but I see this a lot on my phone. Storage almost full because I have way too many photos and just lots of different things going on. So if you can imagine people creating NFT collections and transactions and tons of things on the blockchain every single day, you can pretty much assume that that eventually will be a scaling issue if every single thing is on the blockchain in a transaction. So let's say like one of these NFTs is sold, it goes to someone else, that image is on the blockchain. This is, again, my NFT. I have a doodle. So I'm just going to show you how this is actually stored, because if you look at this, you can see there's an image, there is a collection name, there's a description, and then there's all of these properties that are specific to my NFT. So that's at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of state that would have to be added as fields on chain per NFT, and you can just see how that gets really hairy with the amount that would need to be stored. But in actuality, all of this information is not stored directly on the blockchain. So I'm going to show you how an NFT stores their data. So I just clicked into the link and it's taking me to my doodle on OpenSea. If I go to the About Doodles, there's a little link for Etherscan, which will take me to Etherscan, which is a blockchain scanner. you can see that this is the Doodles contract address. And if you go down, you can look at the contract tab. And so this is the Doodles contract. It's public, which is cool. It's been verified. But if you go to the read contract function and search for token URI, this is one of the fields inside of the smart contract. And I can basically query the contract to get information about my doodle. My doodle is number 6249, so I'm just going to copy this number. And then in the token URI field, I'm going to add the token ID and click query. The result is a string, and it's an IPFS string. I don't know if you all know about IPFS, but we're going to learn about that next. So I'm just going to paste that IPFS string into my browser and see what's there. Actually, I'm going to keep this open. I'll take a new tab so that we still have everything. Okay. So I wish I had that Chrome extension to make this look nicer and format it for you all. But you can see the first thing it says is an image. So this is a JSON file, by the way. And this is what the OpenSea UI is reading. It's not reading something from the chain. The blockchain just knows that the token URI for this doodle is this file. And the file contains an image, a description, and then these are the different attributes. So trait type, face, value, happy note. You can see in OpenSea, clearly my doodle has a post-it note, happy face. So type face, happy note. So all of these different properties are coming from this attributes array, which is stored in this IPFS file that is referenced in the contract here. So all of this different data that we looked at before in the presentation, these 6 fields essentially, don't have to be stored separately as different pieces of state inside of the block. They're all within this IPFS file, which is just a nice little JSON file. So you only have to reference this file rather than having all of these things on the blockchain. So again, IPFS is a distributed file system for storing and accessing files, websites, apps, and data. And one really interesting thing about IPFS is instead of being location-based, the hashes are by the actual file or the content. So the file is hashed so that even if you're on a different like node or something, you can still find the content at the address. One other solution that I haven't worked with yet, but that you should also know about is Arweave. The big difference between IPFS and Arweave is that Arweave enables you to store things forever. So there's this idea of like the permaweb, which is a global permanent web of pages and apps. And it's decentralized, and it makes sure that the files are stored forever so that they can't be taken down or tampered with or anything. So that's kind of an interesting different service that you could use rather than IPFS, depending on your use case. Okay, so next we're going to talk about Infra, but I wanted to come back and give everybody kind of like some space and time to talk about storage and anything that you think about IPFS or Arweave, or maybe even a different storage solution that you've heard of.
Hey, hello, Stephanie. So I have a question for you. Yeah. So what if one day actually IPFS goes defunct? Okay. So what would have happened at the time? Like, what are the consequences after that? Where would all the files and all the NFTs would go if it goes defunct?
Anybody have an answer to that one?
I guess IPFS is a distributed file storage database. So I don't think so like at the end at any moment can get defunct like instantly.
It's not like that. A lot of blockchains have gone defunct in the past. Yeah, so IPFS and Filecoin is also blockchain, so it can also go defunct in the future. Maybe. Then what are the consequences after that?
Although IPFS isn't a blockchain, it's like it's a different layer of things. So like blockchain is another layer of things, Web2 is a different layer, and IPFS is another layer. So in IPFS, whatever that is to be published, nodes archive that data and keep it in their storage unless someone asks to retrieve it. It's stored in the backup files, and if it's something that is accessed very frequently, it's moved to the cache. So it's like that. Globally, many people have their nodes running for IPFS. I don't know about the incentives IPFS gives, but Filecoin gives incentives for people running their nodes to cache this data. So even if it goes defunct, people who like these nodes can come together and rebuild the whole database.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's totally it. Oh, go for it.
Okay. What's the difference between like IPFS and Filecoin? As far as I know, IPFS is kind of a protocol for like file sharing system, and Filecoin is the method to incentivize their data retention. So, am I correct, or like, is there anything else?
Yeah, I'm actually definitely not an expert in the IPFS Filecoin space, but my understanding is, yeah, Filecoin incentivizes people to run nodes by paying them. And then IPFS is kind of the service that you can use to pin your files. And then those files would be hosted by nodes. Does anyone have a better description or know like a ton about IPFS? One fun thing about Web3 is we're all learning in real time. I spoke to Nader Dabit a few weeks ago, and he was like, oh yeah, I think people think that I know all of these things, but I'm just Googling like everybody else. And that made me feel so much better because I was thinking, I've been in this space over a year. I should know more things or have answers to everything, but I definitely don't. I'm always Googling, I'm always figuring things out. For sure, imposter syndrome. Anyone else relate to that? Yeah, and it's almost sometimes scary to be online as a beginner, right? Because you're afraid to ask dumb questions or things like that. But the great thing about programs like this and just the whole community on Twitter is that people are really supportive. So if you have a question or if you want like a better explanation, you could even tweet at someone and say like, hey, Filecoin DevRel people, can you explain to me this difference? And they'll probably tweet back. You'll get some engagement from the team. You could even get a job or networking out of it. And you've helped the entire community with an explanation you've kind of solicited from people who are experts in that field. So I encourage someone to tweet at Filecoin and ask that question because it's a good one. Cool. So let me get back to the presentation. Just do. Sorry, that's my garage. Okay. So next up is Infra. So what is Infra? It is a development platform. It has a great developer experience, and it has two APIs that you'll probably use at some point, including today, in your Web3 learning journey. So it has an Ethereum API and also an IPFS API. We just talked about IPFS, and I'm sure you'll talk a ton about Ethereum and obviously Polygon throughout the fellowship. But this is what the Infra dashboard looks like. It's free to get an account, but I did notice, oh, sorry, where did we go? me click into this. I'm going to open the Infra dashboard. So this is the dashboard. I did notice that in order to create a new project, you actually have to have a credit card attached to your account. I know like not necessarily everyone has a credit card, so I figured I would just show this part from my account. If you do have a credit card, it's free to join Infra, like I said, and it costs $0 up to like 100,000 requests. So you're almost definitely not going to hit that free limit unless you're like throttling or doing something crazy with a script to hit that. But I just wanted to call that out. I have 3 different projects currently. I created these today. You can have up to 3 for free. So I'll probably just delete one of these because I've had them. You can see my 3rd project is a scraper. A few months ago, I was scraping NFT collections as they revealed because I was trying to figure out which NFTs were the most rare and then have a bot buy those. It was pretty expensive, so I don't do that anymore. But that was one thing that I did as a project a few months ago that is still here and lives on in case I ever want to use it again. But anyway, with Infra, you can create an IPFS project or a Ethereum like API node. So that is kind of what it's used for. I'm just going to delete this one, delete it permanently. Yes, so that I can show you how to create a new project. Okay, so we're going to walk through this tutorial. Like I said, if you don't have a credit card and you can't do this, you can just watch along kind of, but let me paste it into the chat. But the point of this is to upload, pin, and unpin files through a little script that you can write yourself using Python and the Infra IPFS API. So this blog post kind of describes how to do it and how to get started. To pin on IPFS to get a link similar to this one, you have to be running a IPFS little project or app. So I'm going to create a new project with IPFS. I'm just going to call it tutorial. And I'll delete this one after because you've all seen my project secret. But this is the project ID and then the IPFS API endpoint. And actually what I just realized is we can all just use my IPFS link for the tutorial. That way you don't all have to put in a credit card and get your own. But I am going to delete this after today, so it's not going to work forever. So if you go through this tutorial, the snippet of code you need is pretty short. I think it's like 4 lines. But essentially you're importing requests. Oh, you have to have Python. Okay, so this is the Infra API. Wait. Where's the .n file? Sorry about this, everybody. I don't know how it's getting the secret. So I found this tutorial and it was just updated in June 2021, but the original tutorial might be slightly better because it is more verbose. So let me find that one. I think this is it. But essentially what I want you all to do is upload a file to IPFS and then prove that you've uploaded the file by sending us a link like this in the chat. So I'll have you go through this yourselves, but I'll give you my project ID, the API endpoint, and the project secret, so you can just use this one for the tutorial, excuse me. So this is... Cool. And I'll give you all about 5 minutes to play with this. It's only 4 lines of Python, so it probably shouldn't take you too long if you have Python set up. If you don't have Python set up, no worries. You can do this part later. But I'll check back in 5 minutes.
Sounds good.
One thing I just posted in the chat, you could totally cheat and use a browser-based file uploader where you just drag and drop a file into essentially a UI. But I wanted to show you this because it's a mechanism to script this out. So if you're doing your own NFT collection or something where you need to upload lots and lots of files, you'll probably want to script it and not one by one drag files in, right? So this is just an alternative if you just needed to host one file.
If anyone has doesn't have Python set up in their system like right now, not readily available, like just feel free to like use the drag and drop file uploader, and maybe you can drop the link to that as well.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for adding that.
For sure.
Yeah, I didn't say ahead of time to download Python or anything like that. So if you don't have a dev environment, no worries. And if you are using the file uploader, what you can do is type IPFS : / and then whatever the hash is that it returns. And then your browser should take you to the actual file that you've uploaded.
Do we have anyone doing it on Python? Maybe you can just drop a message saying if you have worked on it or not.
Oh, cool. We've
Yes, we
got
have the
one.
first link.
You all met Rahat yesterday. Oh, we've got another one. But anyway, I'm going to upload a picture of Rahat to IPFS and tell him that he is now decentralized. Awesome. I can see that people are getting some files pinned on IPFS and uploaded, which is great. So this is, like I said, these are two different methods that you could possibly use in your projects eventually, either manually uploading them through some kind of file uploader and pinning them, or you could script it out like we saw in that tutorial. Oh, I see someone said the protocol access method with IPFS hash is not working for me, opens Google.
I think you have to use a gateway for that, like
Or you
IPFS.io.
could use it in a Brave browser.
Yeah, Rave's the only one that actually supports
Hmm.
straight up IPFS.
Interesting.
okay.
Yeah, I'm in a Brave browser and I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
But I think there's also a Google Chrome extension you can use that will
Right,
just
right.
naturally append it.
Another point I wanted to add, there are other providers like nft.storage. So I'll just quickly link it here. So what these providers do is they open their API for everyone, and then they take on the task of writing the scripts and everything. So just a little abstraction if you want to do it in JavaScript and stuff.
Jayesh, if I remember correctly, did you use that for Marshmallow?
I guess Marshmallow or Shatranj.
Right.
We used it for something. I guess Shatranj, yeah.
All right, all right.
Yeah, thank you for sharing the NFT storage link. There's also a service called Storage, spelled STORJ. And they have something similar where you can just upload straight to them and then they take care of the cost, which is nice. And their whole thing is that the files that they have are encrypted and then they're split apart and stored in a decentralized way. So that's kind of their value add. Does anyone have any other things that they've heard of that provide storage either for NFTs or maybe games or any other use cases?
We also have Pinata, which provides the same service.
Yeah, great example. Pinata is awesome. Cool. We're almost getting to the end. I'll share my screen one more time. So yeah, feel free to go back if you want to that code snippet about how to get started with IPFS on Infra. The other thing that we ran out of time for, and it's kind of outside of the scope anyway, is using the Infra Ethereum API. So you can actually connect and send a transaction using Infra and Web3.js. Essentially, you would use a .env file for that project ID and secret key. And you can see that here, when you're instantiating Web3, the network provider that you're using is the Infura link. So that's the Ethereum API that they provide, which is pretty cool. And again, I think there's a free tier. So this is a good option for what to use for your Web3 provider. But a lot of the Web3 providers right now are free. So feel free to come back and do this if you want to, but no pressure. And then lastly, I just wanted to point out more developer resources. These aren't necessarily about DAOs, storage, or Infra. They're all Polygon resources, but I think they're pretty good. We have our Notion library, our documentation, our academy. You're all in the fellowship, so you probably get more content from the fellowship than academy. But then my favorite place to learn Web3 concepts is ethereum.org, which is just run by the Ethereum Foundation. They have great documentation about like, what is Web3, what is a DAO, what is a blockchain, those kinds of high level concepts. Sometimes when I've Googled things like what is a DAO, I'll get almost like a marketing SEO website that is like a DAO is this, but you can see that the website that's providing the definition isn't in the DAO or Web3 space. So I never know whether to kind of trust those definitions. So I like to use the Ethereum Foundation's website for a lot of my research. And one more thing, I wanted to plug Rahat's series, which is WAGMI with Polygon. It's a really cool video initiative where he's talking to builders. I'm sure he's tapped the class and said, if anyone wants to do a video interview or something, to reach out to him. But he is rahat.eth, I think, on Twitter. So if you're interested in being on Twitter and talking to this guy, Rahat, who is one of my coworkers, feel free to search for him. He's Rahat Codes on Twitter. Just reach out in a DM and say, I want to be on WAGMI on Polygon. And then my Twitter is just Oceans404. It's spelled with a 0. If you want to connect further, just shoot me a message there. But that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for letting me come and present to all of you. I had a great time hearing all of your insights about DAOs and storage and everything. And I'm so excited for this fellowship class because I know you're all going to go on to do awesome things and have awesome projects.
I have a question. Can I ask?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So the question is that if if a DAO has to buy a physical asset, right? So what name goes on the paperwork?
Ooh, good question. I've seen that if DAOs buy NFTs, it comes from the NFT, or I've seen is that like I'm part of developer
Can
DAO.
you repeat? Can you repeat, please?
So if a DAO has to buy
interrupted.
I was just saying, if a DAO has to buy something like a physical dinner, like the developer DAO does a lot of dinners, typically one member will just pay in cash or like on a credit card and then get that amount reimbursed by the treasury of the DAO in crypto. So that's how I've seen it done. But that's another kind of cool idea for a possible hackathon project because that's a use case I haven't seen solved for in a decentralized way yet.
Or
why would someone has to? Why would someone would take that risk to actually take it from the treasury and put it on a physical asset? Like it's kind of risky, right? Since we are talking about decentralized way, and then we are actually going centralized. So
yeah, I think Snapshot already has some integration modules with multi-sig wallets, which automatically does the transaction for you without having anyone to do it.
Cool. Does that work with a credit card as well?
No, it doesn't. It only works with wallets, multi-sig wallets.
There is also this thing called bill pin, which can be used to split bills if you're paying in Bitcoin. So
Any other questions? Maybe we can take one more.
I have one question. So when
Looks
we
like
talk
you're all
about,
good.
yeah,
Oh, sure.
yeah. So when we talk about DAOs, right? You mentioned this application of that FWB site. So since there's no identity, like central identity management like we do in the government, right? So you have your Aadhaar cards or you have your identity, driving license or anything maintained within the government. So when you have a website that's totally decentralized and you say like every decision is taken by the community, so can't like someone who's like super rich or has super like most accessibility to those tokens, like the FWB tokens, they can occupy and create as many accounts as they want, right? And then this decentralization then in turn becomes sort of a monarchy, that the person who's the richest becomes the like decision maker there. So is there a way that DAOs deal with this problem than like this happening?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's definitely a problem statement. If somebody had infinite money, they could just buy the most tokens and any vote they could sway either way because they'd have the most voting power. I don't know if anyone who's solved for that specifically, but I have seen systems talk about kind of a reputation-based voting weight. Does anyone know about anything like that?
I think that's what quadratic voting does. Rather than someone who has 10 voting powers have the upper hand, it favors 10 individual votes.
Right, great. Think we can call this a wrap. So, yeah, Stephanie, thanks a lot for joining in and giving a really great intro to all these arenas of the ecosystem. And like by looking at the questions and interactions, I'm pretty sure the fellows are already quite interested. And in the further weeks, they'll be going much deeper into each of the arenas to sort of find their interest, and whatever problem statements are coming up, maybe take it up on themselves to go ahead and solve it. And once again, like, would like to appreciate and thank for all the time you've given us today.
No problem. Thanks, everyone.
Right. Thanks, everyone. So I actually have like Defolio is giving office hours right now, so I'm happy to like stick around for another 10-15 minutes if anyone has any questions about the fellowship or anything in general. So instead of Discord, I think we can continue it in Discord.
What's the format for the blog? Was it the one that was shared earlier?
The one which was shared. So basically, I think in the assignment itself, we have sort of broken it down. So one thing to note about the blog is like, first of all, don't worry that much. We are not like sort of giving marks to who's writing the best blogs, and only they will get the stipend or something. It's not how that's working. Just the basic things which we want to cover is already mentioned in the Notion, and that is, basically we want you to talk about what did you learn this week, and given that in the past 2 days we have done a couple of 101s on different arenas, so we want you to sort of tell us what was the most interesting one for you, which you are kind of sure you want to go into further and build projects on it. Talk about your assignments, what particularly excited you. Maybe was it how Polygon scan like works, or like what particular for which particular token pair were you a liquidity pool provider, and all those things. Basically, we want you to talk about it, and yeah, maybe also mention a couple of challenges faced, something interesting you came by. Like I can see like some people are dropping some links and reading. Maybe mention that. It has to be just a summary of your entire week, and also to obviously formalize this and help you make it better. We will be having Jonathan from the Polygon team. Maybe next week I'll plan out an office hour with him, maybe like for 15 to 30 minutes, and he will be covering how to write everything. On top of the blog, what I'll also suggest is maybe write a tweet thread on top of it. Point here is that we want you to sort of build in public so that you can go ahead and become the next mentors. People know how to get into the ecosystem. We don't want it to be exclusively just for the fellowship, right? So that is what we are kind of aiming here. Any other questions on the blog part?
Aniket, so I had a couple of questions with regards to like quick swap in general.
I mean, I think I've done
All right.
everything correctly, but I don't quite understand what I've done, which is a
Fair
little
enough.
weird. So, is there
Right.
any more like resources to kind of know what exactly I've done, basically? I mean, I've
Yeah.
finished it, but I don't really understand a lot of it. So,
So what I can do is I'll just drop a couple of links. Like maybe I don't have everything written right now. I can see people have
Mhm.
already started pasting some links. So why don't you just let's put it out in tech discussions or maybe reading. Let's create a thread for this. I'll just do it right now in tech discussion. Links for understanding uh, token swaps uh, better and create thread. Yeah, I will just paste this link there. Copy link address. Yeah, I've just started a thread under tech discussions. So any of you who are coming across any good links, any resources, and just one sec. Hi, sorry. Yeah, so I've created a thread there. Maybe you can start pasting links there. That should help you. And for any specific questions, Safal, you can also just tag me or Daksh even on Discord. We'll take it up. That's what you want.
sure, sure. So, again, I mean, I just wanted to understand how exactly the liquidity pair stuff works. So, basically,